Welcome everybody to another edition of Bourbon Banter. Evans, Justin, we're here. What's in store for the people tonight?
Hey, we're doing a little bit of bourbon homework in our bourbon office, so that's always pretty cool. Welcome to the Bourbon Roundtable again, everybody. Thank you for joining in.
Yep.
I say we do some bourbon buzzwords and terms.
Hey, that sounds good to me.
I'm getting a lot out in the market of people still asking different questions. What does this mean? You know, things like that. Or I saw this written down. I'm looking for this specific thing. So let's go over some. This might seem some 101 for some people, but some people might not know these things. So we're going to go over a couple of terms and.
Well, and there could be some things out there that are not correct.
That's true, and it could be some misinformation. So we're going to go ahead and talk about those things, and we're going to actually have people that are coming up into the room tonight and possibly interacting.
Yep.
And coming up with ideas or questions to ask us as well. And so we can kind of shoot from the fly if there are some terms that you guys want to know or aren't sure or haven't researched already or have heard. Reach out, put it in the comments, shoot us a message and let us know. Well, if we don't know the term, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. And please, I mean, honestly, put it in the comments. We love the comments. We'll answer everything that we can. And so, honestly, the one that I think a lot of people probably get incorrect, and I'll just start this off, barrel proof.
Oh, yeah, big time.
So
you would think that is, and there's I'm wearing the socks.
Oh, we forgot about that. Yep, Lux Row.
I'm wearing bourbon socks to a specific location that I got into an argument over barrel proof. Over what the terms were, because by definition, according to them, there is no true definition what barrel proof is. But it's pretty straightforward to me. Barrel proof is when the whiskey comes straight out of the barrel without being cut by water or anything else.
Right.
Same thing with cask strength. Just cask strength was more common used at different whiskeys, whereas America happened to use barrel proof. But they use cask strength, maker's cask strength, you know. Different things like that. Speaking of that, cheers to you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining in. During this video, we're going to be drinking the control. Is that good?
Oh, no. Control sucks.
So we're going to have a good bit of control on this one and go over some of these terms. So I like the fact that you led off with barrel proof, cask strength. That's our take on it. We are on the standpoint of it is the whiskey that comes straight out of the barrel, straight into the bottle, as the proof it is then.
It's not touched, it's not watered down, it's nothing. It's not cut, it's right out of the barrel.
Hence the argument I had at Lux Row with the employee that was working there, that their cask strength Ezra Brooks and cask strength Rebel Yell is always 120 proof, even with their single barrels. Now you can do a batch proof just like Ezra Brooks did and make it 117 always, because you can take one barrel that's 120 and one barrel that's 112 and one barrel that's this number and mathematically get it to where it is still barrel proof, but you had a higher one that mathematically reaches that, which we talked about that in the video before. But to always have a 120 proof single barrel, he openly admitted that they do add water to that. So therefore, I call that a invalid barrel proof.
Yep, I would agree. And so I'm curious, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you. I don't think that's their entry proof, is it?
No, the entry proof for them, to my understanding, is still 125.
Okay.
Now, their weeded stuff, which a lot of their stuff was sourced at one point from a different distillery, so their generally weeded entry proof is a lower proof than the standard rye. And that's another buzzword, if you want to call it that, is entry proof. So entry proof is referring to
the way it what it goes in, what the white dog is that goes into the barrel.
That's right. So there's another one, white dog.
Yeah.
So or new make. This is the whiskey coming off the still at a certain proof, and then they will add water to it to make the entry proof be within the rules of what they want to have their entry proof in, or within their definition of what their entry proof is, because it could be different. Like Maker's Mark is lower than some, but it's weeded. 114 is the entry proof for like Weller. 125 is the entry proof for BT1, which goes to another term.
And we're just sitting there. We're going to rattle them off, and it might be kind of hard to follow sometimes, but all of these all lead into each other.
Yeah, they really do. It's like a big intertwining web.
Yeah.
So entry proof to BT1, Buffalo Trace Mash 1, BT2, Buffalo Trace Mash 2, and then you've got some, the proprietary, but we won't get into proprietary, which that's another term, but that's less likely used or seen in market, is 125, which is a lot of the entry proof for standard mash. So 125. So your entry proof is what it enters the barrel at. Yeah. And different distilleries have different entry proofs based off of the way they want their whiskey to turn out in the barrel.
Yep. And then another one that I think is really good, and I love finding these out there, NCF bottles.
Oh, so NCF is a huge term that I've even gone to some distilleries, and I'm not going to name names, that they weren't sure what NCF was. And we've done NCF, which is non-chill filtered or non-chill filtration, in our videos before and explained what it was. The best way to describe it was the way it was described to me, and I changed my whole definition. Well, not definition. I changed the way I described it for non-chill filter, like country-style green beans, which we've done this in videos in the past.
Yep.
And you bring the whiskey down below freezing all the fatty acids, amino acids, all this stuff float to the top. They take a screen and screen it off. Then they bring the temperature back, or the whiskey back up to temperature, and now you have this nice, clear, doesn't do anything. That's chill filtering. Non-chill filtering is you do nothing.
Yep, you just basically, there it goes.
Here it is. The whiskey is dumped out of the barrel. You cut it to whatever proof you want it to be on your bottle label.
Get your batch.
And then that's non-chill filtered.
Yep.
If it gets cold, a lot of them turn foggy, or they get like a cloudiness to it. Foggy, cloudy.
Yeah, cloudy, yeah. But I'll tell you this, I love some of the NCF. Some of the best bourbons I've had are NCFs.
Yeah, and there's like half the people, and I say half, it might be, I don't have any real statistics on this now, not anymore, but I will still stick with half the people say NCF, you're taking the flavor away, and then if you're NCF is all the flavor, and chill filtered is taking the flavor away. You're leaving some of that flavor out, but uncut, unfiltered for me, that mistake. No, I said it backwards. I admit it. So,
but still, no. I like NCFs and I like non-NCFs. I mean, it's good. If you're doing your bourbon right, you're doing it. I mean, it's going to be good.
All right. How about some shipping terms? So if you've been on these websites that are like bourbon websites, and you are in a state that does allow you to ship, whiskey or whatever, and say that somebody says, it's $5 extra for EOM.
East of the Mississippi.
East of the Mississippi. So that means if your zip code is east of the Mississippi, you can spend $5 more to get it shipped to you. Or what if somebody says this whiskey is $25, and then somebody puts in the comments, or somebody's on the website and they put BIN?
Well, that's buy it now. That means, look, I'm not going to try to finagle with you. I just want it right now. Yeah, I'll give you the price you want.
That also refers to a lot of these other things, which we've talked about in the secondary market.
Yes.
So there is a secondary market. We've mentioned it before. We don't talk too much about it. It is a thing.
It is a thing.
You'll see a lot of those words on that if you're on those, and we're not saying that you should be on them. We're not saying that you know anybody or that you even know about them. It is a thing that we are aware of. That's what, as far as that goes.
It's out there, and it is a thing, just like you said.
And speaking of secondary, there's a secondary value.
There is.
So that is another term that you might hear, is if you're out in market and shopping around and you're like, how much is that bottle? Well, it's $50. Ooh, $50. What's the secondary value?
Yeah.
Oh, secondary value is $100.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of people talking about secondary value.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what they're referring to.
Definitely. Yep. And it seems like sometimes a lot of the bottles you go for at a store are secondary value.
Yeah, and that's true. So cheers to you guys. Thanks again for joining in. Click, like, subscribe. Did I get that right?
Like and subscribe right down below. And please, honestly, we look forward to hearing your comments. Let's hear what you have to say. Have any questions? Any buzzwords we might have missed? Let us know.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll go over that. And man, this control is good.
It is very good.
All right, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What's a single barrel?
A single barrel? A single barrel is going to be a bottle that comes from a single barrel of bourbon.
So one
single barrel. The bottle is not a single bottle. There's multiple bottles out of that barrel, but it's one single barrel.
All right, which leads me to my next question. When you see or hear or read the term store pick, barrel pick.
Yep. That's a single barrel.
Single barrel, but it's for that.
It's for that specific store that they are somebody associated with them decided to pick, or they designated somebody to pick a barrel for them.
All right.
Would you agree?
Now the hardest question.
No.
Small batch.
Small batch. Okay. So a small batch is not a large batch. No. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. So moving on.
So a small batch is going to be a very. It depends on the number. I don't know the numbers off the side. I think what is it under 100?
There's no true definition yet.
But what it is it's a smaller number of barrels that they batch together to get a product.
Right. And the best way to describe this was a long time ago at the distillery. So I think I was in 2011 when I was going up there, and they described it in a manner that made sense. They're like, even though there's no true definition of what small batch is, you could put it on as many barrels as you want and call it a small batch. It's an advertising term that came out. I think it really started getting popular in the 80s. I know single barrel came out in 84.
Yeah.
And then small batch was a thing. Elijah Craig was one of the earlier small batches, and I think that was 94. So it may have been the 90s that small batch started to become popular. Baker's was one of the small batch series that came out pretty early. But anyhow,
was it one of those ways to try to get people to come back to bourbon?
Yeah, marketing. Yep. So that being said, if your total batch for a product is 1,000 barrels or 2,000 barrels, and so they were describing it at the distillery was a good way, a rule of thumb for small batch was 10%.
10%.
So 200 barrels. Yeah. Even though that's a lot of barrels. And Elijah Craig in the early days of their batches, I've got a book that I was reading. I admit to reading, so I usually don't do that. It was actually, they were referring to their batch was around 70 something barrels, and that was really like, that's almost extremely small, like a micro batch. Now, but micro batch would be like 2 barrels, 3 barrels, something like that.
So let me ask you this. It's another one that we have on here. PVW, would you consider that a small batch?
They don't put it on the label, but it's definitely a small batch.
Yeah.
For the amount of barrels they use, they could put that. I think they should do that just to add another bit of a stir to the pot,
And so
start putting PVW small batch, and people would freak out that it's got a different label on there. And PVW is Pappy Van Winkle.
Yep.
So while we're talking about that, we might as well, if you ever see the word or see the phrase or read it, or somebody comes into a store and you hear them say, "Hey, you got any BTAC?"
Buffalo Trace.
Antique collection.
Antique collection.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is the once a year generally released, limited run products of the Buffalo Trace distillery, and they've got like 5 different whiskeys, I think.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6? No, I think it's only 5, isn't it? Well, we can count them out.
I thought it was 5.
It's 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
THH, Thomas H. Handy.
Right.
WLW, these are more terms, buzzwords. William LaRue Weller. GTS, George T. Stagg. ER17. Eagle Rare 17.
SAS 18.
SAS 18.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm uncut, unfiltered. I'm sitting here. I'm like, I'm missing one, but I'm not missing one. No.
There was no. We don't even get into that. This is terms. This is terms.
Yeah.
All right. Char. So you got different levels of char, and that is literally how long the intense flame is on the barrel, and then it causes up to an alligator char, which is level 5, which looks like the scales of an alligator, what they call that. A lot of barrels that are out there aging bourbon right now are 3 and 4 char level. And it is a time limit, or not time limit, a time frame that they char the barrel for, and that's how the flame interacts with the wood. It opens up different layers of the wood, cracks, and it causes an actual natural filtration, and that's where a lot of the color, or if not all the color comes from.
It gives it a little bit more surface.
A lot of flavor too. Yep.
And so let me ask you this though, on that note. So do all of them do a char level as far as 1, 2, 3, or do they go low, medium, high?
It just depends on what they choose.
Yeah.
Some of that is like secretive, but some of them will tell you what the char is. A lot of them do a char number.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, who's to say that you have to do 45 seconds to be a char level 3 or 4?
Right.
Or why can't you do 48 seconds? What if you come up with something like that? So it's exact to certain ones that have been doing it for a long time, but I have seen and heard some people at the distilleries that they have their own unique charring amount, but it would be the equivalent of a char 3 or something like that.
Yeah, and another good one we've done before in a video is toasted. So actually go back into our videos, and we have one all on toasted.
Toasted,
barrels.
yeah. So that we'll just skip that one, but toasted is a buzzword as far as it's a really big popular thing right now. A lot of brands are doing toasted.
Yeah.
And double oaked is another term that's usually involving 2 barrels.
And so
one could be toasted and one could be charred, which then we have a double barrel toasted.
Well, then that could go to one of our other ones right there, the finishing.
The finishing, yep. So then that's technically a finished whiskey. And then we were talking about this before we turned the camera on, was whether or not we were going to agree that if you take a bourbon that is 8 years old and then stick it in a port cask, a Cabernet cask, insert whatever wine cask for 6 months, then bottle it, do you have a bourbon or do you have a whiskey?
Maker's 46.
That's French oak staves.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a pass.
Yep. I know, but still. It's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of people will sit there and they'll go that, but no, you and I agreed that to me, if it's finished in any type of other than a white oak or something of that nature.
If it's finished in something other than new charred oak.
Yep.
And if it's had wine in it, which creates a wine barrel, that's a finished product, and that has had something else touch the whiskey.
To me,
by definition, that's a whiskey, not a bourbon.
Right.
But they still put bourbon on the label, so not to say that you don't think that. So what do you guys think? Do you think it's a bourbon or whiskey? That's actually a really good controversial topic of, is a finished whiskey or bourbon actually a bourbon or is it a whiskey?
Yeah, and no, I think that's a great comment. I think it's great for discussion that we can have, and especially on the comments and the down below. And honestly, subscribe, and give us some comments on that too.
Yeah, that'd be a good live one to do.
Yeah.
It would be. So, BIB.
Bottle and bond.
That's one of our favorite terms. Thank you, E.H. Taylor, for
Yes,
a lot
indeed.
of his work from 1897. One of the first Food and Drug Acts to ever do anything for protecting the consumer.
Yeah.
You know, that's cool.
From rock gut.
We were more concerned about whiskey than food back then, you know, which makes sense.
Probably
I agree with
consumed
that.
more whiskey than food.
Yeah, that's probably true too. All right. Here's a controversial one also. SRP and MSRP. And the only reason that's controversial is because there is all those other words we mentioned before, aka secondary value and things of that nature. So we all know what SRP and MSRP stand for: manufacturer suggested retail price or suggested retail price.
Right.
So if somebody comes into the store and says, "What's the SRP of this? I see that you got it for $79.99." That means that they're thinking that you're overcharging and that's get a little inflated price, that it's actually $50, but you're trying to get an extra 20 out of it.
But that's their SRP.
Yeah.
That's not the MSRP that the manufacturer suggests you
So
sell.
they are suggesting that, and the manufacturer, which would be like your supplier or your distributor, that's coming out with the cost and does your percentages on, you know, and different MSRPs are in different states.
Yep.
Different states have markup versus margin, not a buzzword.
No.
Those are just business terms.
Just the way it is.
Yeah. All right. One that I'm not a fan of, that we've talked about in other videos, we're just going to mention it because you do still see it every once in a while. Tater.
Yep. Yeah. No.
Charles, what's tater paper?
I don't know. I can tell you what I want to say, but I'm not going to say it.
Yeah. So tater paper refers to the paper that comes on some of the bottles, and whether or not you have it. Which again, I'm not a fan of the word tater.
I'm not a fan of it either.
Yeah, it is literally referring to. Some of these bottles are nicer, higher end, if you want to call it that, come with paper on it, and it'll get destroyed in packaging, processing, delivery, stuff like that. And paper on it. Yeah. And so somebody might say, "Hey, you got the tater paper?" They're referring to that piece of paper that it came on.
But no, tater, that's one that
we don't agree with.
No, don't agree with it. Everybody has their opinion.
Yeah.
And
there's
guess what?
actually an entire site that talks about if you are a tater, and there's no possible way, I don't think, to be not one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
or
I mean,
not be one.
The thing is everybody. Guess what? We live in a world where everybody should be able to do what they want to with their whiskey, with their bourbon, with anything they want to. And if they want to post it out there, and we've talked about it before, all the shots that people take and everything, more power to you.
Hey, I mean, you know, we did that in the controversial video that we did last time, which is a really good video, like collection versus consumption. I mean, that's if they want to have insert this brand here always the best, and then everybody gives them a hard time, that doesn't matter. They like it. That's up to them.
Yep.
Pre-fire.
Haha. So you're the authority on this, but Heaven Hill.
Yeah, Heaven Hill had a fire in 1996.
96. Yeah.
Pre-fire is literally referring to all the whiskey that was barreled prior to that burning of the distillery, the still, and several rick houses, which was a really cool thing. Look up the videos. They have videos of this. It's insane.
Especially the rivers on fire.
Yeah, it's really cool. All the community in Bardstown and other locations came together because bourbon is their way of life, and they all, even though they are competitors only to sales reps, but collectively they are just a bourbon family. They got a lot of barrels donated to be able to put their product out during that time, and that was really cool to find out.
And you've seen pre-fire stuff on previous videos that we've had.
Yeah, we do. We've done definitely. We're fans of pre-fire, which is the different distillery that burned down prior to the fire, which was 1996, and then the location of distilling for Heaven Hill products was in a different city later on. It goes from Bardstown to Louisville.
Right.
Well, Bernheim at some point, but that's.
I forgot about Bernheim.
That's a different. Okay. That Bernheim did a lot of other stuff too, contracts. So that's side note. This one, this is a good term that people hear and they kind of aren't sure, but they're specifically. I've had older customers at one point, which would now be just friends or family or people that are coming into a store and looking specifically for sour mash. They don't want it unless it says sour mash.
Yep.
Like 99% of bourbon is sour mash.
Yeah, and what always gets me is a lot of people have, I've heard people like, "Oh, sour mash, this beer." No. Sour mash is what it is you're leaving some of the leftover mash from the other one that they just did. You're leaving some in there. You're getting those.
It's like sourdough.
Yeah,
it's your previous spent yield,
and you're getting that in there.
And there's a percentage that some use that's higher than others.
I did not know that. Yeah.
And so there are some companies that do sour mash whiskey or bourbon that they use a higher percentage, and you can tell a difference.
Well, and you still have some of the yeast left over, all that. You know, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty neat. To me, it's a neat way of doing distillery.
Pretty much what they're saying is the best way for consistency.
Yeah.
And then if you ever had a sweet mash, that means it's new. It's a brand new run every time.
Yeah.
And Wilderness Trail they do a lot of sweet mash. So you want somebody that's really good at perfecting an art. It's those guys, which I think they're super cool because they're nerdy because they do yeast strains, and that's one of the main things that they do is yeast strains for companies. I mean, they did the Yellowstone recreation within the mash tub, and we're able to extract that like Jurassic Park style, which was really cool. But the fact that you can make that whiskey still quality every time without sour mash, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's the best way to do sour mash. Now, if I've got barrels of whiskey, where am I aging this?
To me, you're going to age it in a rick house.
But is barrel warehouse also okay?
I mean, I guess you could call it whatever you want to.
Yeah, technically, it's a barrel house. It's a barrel rick house.
Right.
And, rick house is what they refer to it because the way the ricks are set up when they were just actually building them, and the rick is the layer of the barrels going into there, and then you have the levels.
Yep.
And so you have your floors and your ricks. So the ricks are where the barrels sat. You know, no, we won't even get into that. That's not the term.
But what I like about it is if you've seen some of the barrels that we've seen, a lot of the single barrels that we've had on there will kind of state where they were kind of at.
Yep.
You
can be farther into the rick. You can be further out. Or you can be closer to a window.
Yep.
You can be further up on the floor.
Yep.
The heart of the rick house is generally in the middle. Think of it like insulation.
Yep.
You know, you've got a bunch of barrels around you. All right. All right. Here's a big one.
Okay.
And I thought about we could probably do an entire video on this.
Ooh.
Age statement.
Age statement. So
I'm gonna ask the people in the background: is whiskey better with an age statement or without an age statement?
Depends on the whiskey.
I would agree with that. Depends on the whiskey.
Age is just a number. Isn't that what females say?
Yeah.
I think I'm saying that I'm
Age
older
is
now.
state of mind.
Age is just state of mind. Yeah.
But what I really think it is, and I think the misconception is, it's age stated 8 years. So everything going in there is 8 years, right?
The youngest going in there is 8 years. Whatever the age statement is on any bourbon is the youngest whiskey that is used in making that. Now, if it's a single barrel and it says 8 years, it's an 8 year. And it might be 8 years and 11 months. But it's still an 8 year.
They don't round up or down. I mean, it's just an 8 year.
Now they can, like some of them will put it on there. Bakers will do that. When we do barrel picks, we'll put the months on there sometimes, just because you can do the math on that.
Right.
But perfect example, Calumet Farms small batch.
Yeah.
It is a blend of 50 barrels, 25 8-year and 25 15-year barrels. So the age statement is
8 year.
An 8 year.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that half of that batch was really old.
Just like if you want to go PBW Pappy Van Winkle 23.
The youngest.
That doesn't mean that they're all 23. The youngest barrel in there had to be 23. You might be getting something 30 years. You never know. Yeah. It doesn't say it on there. You have no idea. So
that's extremely correct.
Like and subscribe, everybody.
Cheers.
So what else we got on here? Are we about done with what we have?
Rick houses. What happens in a rick house when the barrels are aging there? Why do the rick houses smell so good? Is there something that we like to refer to, a specific name of the angel share?
The specific name? You're getting me on this one.
That is it. The
angel
specific
share.
name is the angel share.
I thought you when you asked that, I was like, specific name of the angel share. I wanted to go, I thought it was angel share. But sorry. Uncut, unfiltered.
Yeah. So the angel share, that's why it smells so good, is because there's a percent that's evaporating that the angels get to drink before we do. Mm-hmm. And that's what they call that. So the liquid that's evaporating in the barrels that's staying in the rick house, and it makes the rick house smell amazing because of all the evaporation. It's just a great, great smell.
And it honestly, if you haven't been to a rick house or haven't done a tour of a distillery or anything, go do it. Go see if you can get into a rick house, because that smell is amazing. I love that smell. If they could put that in and I'm pretty sure they probably have, in a candle. It would be everywhere in my house.
Yeah, we do have some bourbon candles that are really good. So, yeah. Let's see. We did finishing over oaked. Over oaked is when the oak outweighs most of the tasting. But a lot of people will use that in terms that you'll hear, and like if you're going to a bourbon tasting or if you're listening to a bourbon video, they'll talk about it's over oaked. Well, that's when oak is like the first, like it's the most pronounced taste that you get. And I like to refer to it as a little comical way. I feel like I'm chewing on toothpicks. Yep. And so everybody at one point, well, for the most part, everybody at one point has tried to get something out of their teeth with a toothpick, and then you hold the toothpick in your mouth, and you can literally taste the wood. Yeah. That's what I'm referring to as, it tastes like toothpicks.
It makes me think of fingernails on.
Yeah. But I mean, over oak does happen.
It does.
I mean,
well, I've had plenty of bourbons that are usually it's more of your older age stated or older bourbons. They can tend to be a little oak. Little oaky,
that's a little oak forward.
Yeah.
And by just rule of thumb, standard mash doesn't age as well longer as weeded mash. Weeded mash stands up better to longer time in the barrel than standard mash. Weeded just,
makes sense.
It's just, it's just the way it reacts. Sweet wheats is what they call them. Then you've got the weeded mash that's 23 years versus go try a standard mash that's 23 years. That standard mash is going to taste a lot oakier.
Yep.
And you also take a risk after 14 years. If a standard mash ages 14 years or longer, you take a risk of it not being any good.
Yeah.
And that was all this stuff was, from visiting and, meeting a lot of master distillers and things like that and learning what they do and what they look for when they're aging something to try to get a specific product with a specific name on it and things of that
Well,
nature.
wouldn't you say also a lot of these, when it first started out, a lot of the old stuff that was out there is because whiskey just wasn't selling as good as the clear liquor, so they were just holding on to it.
They had a lot of it. Scotch was more popular than bourbon because it goes through the times of the decades. It just wasn't selling, and Scotch had age statements on it, so bourbon's like, well, we're going to start putting age statements on it to keep up with the Scotch. And then now we start losing age statements because the demand is there.
Right.
And then voila, now we're like, ooh, this one's got an age statement on it. And that's a really big buzzword.
A lot of people love the age statement on them. So it does not necessarily mean that it's going to be better, because I've had some age stated bourbons that are not very good.
Yeah, but again, that goes back age statement and over oaking. These are all back to that web.
Well, it's a web. It's an if you're going to talk bourbon, you're going to run into
most these
things are
again,
a lot more.
And we're not trying to make this bourbon 101. This is just a refresher of terms because there's still a lot of new people getting into bourbon and those things. And why not put the information out, which is one of the reasons we did this, because we've watched a lot of videos ourselves that it was misinformation.
Yeah, so. And that's the one thing that we want to do is we want to put something out there that we try to be as accurate as possible. We give you what we think as far as tasting and everything. That's what we think. And that's what we always put out there.
Now, two things that we have skipped, or did we talk about proof versus ABV?
No, we did not.
All right, so proof is 80 proof. ABV is alcohol percent by volume.
Yep.
And alcohol beverage
volume. Yeah.
Alcohol by volume.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's alcohol by volume. That probably is not going to be heard because I said that too lightly. Anyhow, it's half. So if it's 80 proof, it's 40% alcohol. If it's 100 proof, 50% alcohol.
Yep.
So your proof is always double what your ABV is. If anybody would like to know what the ABV or the proof of this control is, you gotta have to try it and figure it out because we're still not going to tell you.
Nope, not going to tell you a bit.
All right, last thing. I put this last only because it was the last thing I thought of when writing down on our list. So we didn't talk about mash. The mash is the actual percentage of the cereal grains, which is mostly what is used to make the bourbon, which turns into a distiller's beer. And then you have the wort and all that, which then you distill it and it becomes an alcohol. Is 4 grain. So if you're going to get into the grains and the mash bills, we'll just say mash bills, mash for short. If I say to somebody, what's the mash? Are they usually referring to your flavor grain if they say, what's the mash? Technically, it'd be like saying, does it have wheat?
Yep.
Or does it have rye?
Right.
Because rye is your standard mash, and wheat is your softer grain. It's your wheat mash. And a lot of times, I've said this in videos before, corn is sweet, wheat is smooth, and rye is spice. Yep. Well, there's all kind of other grains too. Malted barley is your filler grain.
Yep.
And so your 4 grain, which if you see that on there, you're like even more excited because, a lot of those 4 grains have a little bit of wheat in there, which usually tends to soften them or maybe sweeten them up a little bit. But that is if you generally a 4 grain is referring to wheat, rye, malted barley, and corn. And
one of the ones that always sticks out to my mind is E.H. Taylor. They're
4 grain. Yeah, I've always referred to that one. Now another fun 4 grain is Rabbit Hole, and so they use 2 different barleys, if I remember correctly. There's a honey barley, a wheat, and a corn.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's a specifically different 4 grain, but it is a 4 grain. So I look forward to trying different 4 grains. There's actually a 6 grain out there.
No, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. Which is not a buzzword. It's just a thing. Maybe it will be a buzzword one day. Or a bourbon buzzword or term.
Yeah. Well, I think we've hit everything that we have on our list. Honestly, if you can think of anything else, put down in the comments. And you never know, we might get enough comments, we might have to do another video.
Yeah, I mean, there's always plenty of terms. So cheers to you guys. Thanks for joining in.
Cheers. Like and subscribe down below.